Click, click. The sound of slow-turning gears echoed through the domed chamber, where the High Council of the alien race was in an emergency session. The ceiling light shifted to deep red, signaling Level 3 alert. The air felt thick like hot glue, heavy and suffocating. Each being present held the highest command rank, boasting intelligence quotients over 190 by the intergalactic scale. They sat in a circle, backs straight as statues, eyes unblinking, their pale silver or ash-gray skin occasionally pulsing with flickers of light, as if their neural signals ran across the surface. A four-eyed figure, General Vrak, triggered the replay of the recent battle. Crash, crack, boom! Drone 042 exploded. Shards scattered across the floor. Jake stood still, untouched, his gaze empty, as though staring through life itself. No one spoke, but their neural patterns began spiking erratically. At Station 4, an alien flinched, its long three-jointed fingers tapping frantically at the microcircuit near its ear. Click, click, click. Encrypted transmissions were being sent. "We must harvest his DNA," said a deep, gravelly voice, like stone grinding stone. "No!" Vrak cut in, his eyes flaring red, a sign of fear among his kind. "Let him think he's winning, then kill him when he lets his guard down." The scheme began then. They summoned Jake to a chamber known as the Hall of Truth, a place once used to convince the conquered that submission was evolution. The door hissed open, a burst of cold mist venting out like toxic gas. Inside, everything was made of holographic projections, from the floating candles to the crystalline table. The alien emperor appeared, gliding effortlessly atop a levitating throne. Each word he uttered sliced the air, his language a combination of triple-layered ultrasonic tones, making listeners feel tiny electric shocks crawl up their spine. "Jake of Earth," he said with a lipless smile, just a cracked arc across his face. "You have proven your kind's strength. Sit, drink. Let us speak as allies." Zzzt! A mechanical arm extended a glass of pitch-black liquid, white mist swirling above it like nitrogen vapor. Jake didn't drink. He simply looked around and noticed 36 hidden camera, 8 heart rate monitors, and a neural probe embedded in the floor. "Why speak to me now?" "Because before, your kind was unworthy." Silence. Jake quietly pushed the glass back toward the Emperor, eyes cold as forged steel. In that moment, the entire illusion in the room flickered slightly, like a mental veil cracking. Behind transparent walls, the observers stirred, neuromonitor. The offer was withdrawn. The tone shifted. A command followed. "Surrender and lead us to the others. We will spare what remains." Jake said nothing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, an old, scratched badge, showing Earth surrounded by 13 stars. He tossed it on the table. Clack. "This is my answer." And then, boom! The room shook. Alarms blared. Security breach on subaxis level 3. Jake hadn't come just to fight. He had decoded the facility's layout. A group of surviving humans, imprisoned as test subjects, had just been freed, and they were advancing toward the central control hub. Outside, the sky darkened. The defense grid began to shudder. Energy beams crisscrossed like a frantic web. Inside the alien base, a chain reaction began. One alien officer took his own life. A combat drone malfunctioned and turned on its masters. A neural control device exploded under psychological stress overload. They, who once commanded millions, were unraveling. They had never imagined a species they called primitive could terrify an empire with sheer will to live. An alien stammered, "We must retreat to Alpha Command immediately!" But it was too late. A signal from the prison wing flashed on screen. Cryopod code 0031-A unlocked. Another being had awakened, a human, from Earth, and this time Jake wasn't alone. A deep tremor echoed from the lowest level of the base. The entire structure shuddered with each pulse, and the metallic walls groaned with the brittle crackle of fractures spreading like veins. Inside the control room, the lighting shifted from sterile white to blood red, then flickered in glitching greens and blues, like blood swirling in cold water. At the center, elevated by a magnetic platform, a tall alien, the commander of the operation, slowly rose to his feet. His skin gleamed like bio-armor, silver gray and cold as dry ice. His flat, lidless eyes shifted from pale violet to searing red, glowing like phosphorescence in a dark chamber. He stared at the main screen, where the second cryopod was shown opening, mist spilling out like a fog storm. Then he laughed. Kirk, Kirk, Kirk. Not a full-bodied laugh, but sharp and dry, like steel scraping across glass. He leaned back, muscles relaxed, arms lowered like a conductor content after the second act of his tragedy. "They think they're winning," he whispered, lips curling into a cut-thin smile. Around him, his subcommanders bowed slightly, but their eyes gleamed with shared satisfaction. They didn't run. They didn't panic. On the contrary, every step they took echoed cold and steady, clack, 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 like actors stepping into a well-rehearsed scene. They had never lost control. The signal from the second cryopod? Just bait. No matter how strong the humans were, they were still pieces on a test board. This base was merely one of 19 branch cloning stations, built to fall by design, and Jake, the one who started it all, was the final trigger needed to complete Project BioWar Genesis. Let him think he's won. Let him destroy. And then, the commander gave the order. Initiate controlled detonation, levels 3 through 7. Beep, beep, beep. Lights flashed. A female synthetic voice rang out, calm and unfeeling. Self-destruct sequence initiated, T-minus 180 seconds. Everything turned crimson. The temperature spiked. The walls flexed and hissed like blistered flesh under fire. The air thickened with the chemical stench of burning ozone. The alien stood motionless, watching the tactical map flash red across all zones. No one ran, no one screamed, because what was burning was just the shell. Far above, the command ship silently disengaged from the crumbling base. Its ion drive didn't roar, only hissed softly, like a serpent gliding across frozen glass. Inside, the commander entered the navigation bay and stared at Earth, shrinking in the reflection screen. "It's time," he murmured, tapping the interface. A series of cryopods began activating, not from the ruined base below, but from Orbit Ring Station 5, where over 30,000 original human specimens were being stored. "We've finished planting the seeds. Now we wait for the harvest." His voice hissed between clenched teeth, drawn out like steam from a pressure valve in a dead winter night. Down below, Jake still didn't know. He believed he had changed history, but history had been rewritten long before he ever woke up. Boom! A thunderous explosion tore through the atmosphere as if the crust of the planet had just been ripped open. The ground trembled violently, and the air fractured into invisible shock waves that crushed against eardrums like a drowning scream from a furious ocean. From the horizon, a colossal column of fire shot upward, a flaming vortex, twisting into the sky for miles, spewing black smoke and ash like radioactive rain. War had begun. Across the orbital belts of the fifth planet, more than 2,700 massive biotransport units opened fire in unison. Torrents of blazing red plasma streaked through space like swords of fire. In less than 17 seconds, 3 of humanity's forward bases, once hubs for high-tech weapons research, were completely erased from existence. No walls, no domes, only a gaping, blackened crater remained, its rim hissing, glowing like an open wound, exposing the heart. Inside the command chamber of the alien fleet, over 8,000 warrior entities activated combat protocols. Standing 2 to 4 meters tall, their grotesque forms were a fusion of flesh and machine. Their clawed limbs stabbed into the metallic floor, echoing with a clang, clang, clang like war drums pounding across the stars. This wasn't just a war, it was an execution on an interplanetary scale. Above Earth, hundreds of battered human starships launched like tattered arrows aimed at death itself. They knew they were weaker. They knew they were outnumbered. But each ship, from 5-person corvettes to 60,000-ton cruisers, accelerated at full thrust, without hesitation. Boom! One was struck by plasma, erupting in an instant. Its debris spun like a swarm of metallic insects across the void. But none turned back. In low orbit, human ground troops, each clad in 180-kilogram exo-armor directly linked to their nervous systems, leapt from transport ships 60 kilometers above the surface. They fell like meteorites, wrapped in trails of plasma and screaming friction. When they landed, the Earth buckled with each impact. These soldiers were all that remained, the last generation raised during the resource wars. And at their head was Jake, the man awakened from the first cryopod. Clad in dark armor, the faded insignia of the Earth-born force still visible on his shoulder, Jake's eyes showed no fear, only silence. He gave no order, he simply raised his hand and pointed forward. The moment that hand rose, the soldiers behind him surged to life, storming forward like a hurricane tearing through smoke and dust, engines roaring, armor groaning with each explosive step. The sound of their charge was like ancient war drums echoing from the depths of time. The battlefield became a fever dream of thunder and flame. Above, starships detonated in clusters like deadly fireworks. Below, steel-armored waves. And towering above it all, watching from the ridgelines, stood the aliens. Hundreds of eyes, glowing like dried blood, fixated on every movement. No words, no expressions. They were like ancient nightmares carved into living stone, still, cold, merciless. But behind those eyes was not surprise. It was curiosity, as if they were waiting for the final reaction from an experiment centuries in the making. Because to them, this was never a battle. It was a final assessment. A question, one humanity would answer in blood. Do you still deserve to survive?